writing policies in California as well as Florida, focusing on using data to drive efficiencies as well as make better underwriting decisions. So what is this presentation about? This presentation is kind of a culmination of the last 6 months that I've spent at Kin. So basically, you know, when I started at Kin, there really wasn't a tried and true data organization. It was kind of picked up by, you know, some developers as well as some business owners. Even like our COO would be like writing SQL queries, which is just crazy to me. And he owned a lot of the different data sources that we had. So there really just wasn't anything in place. And when I got brought on, I was tasked with the responsibility of essentially building out a data organization from scratch. So this is just going step by step, the process. And, you know, there is like a process that's like very by the book, and you can kind of follow that like as much as you can, but obviously like you're going to run into issues along the way. And that's kind of like the joy of it. You get to like, you know, there's tons of different issues that arise and you have to react quickly and make decisions quickly. So it makes it exciting and fun. And then I also want to just build relationships with all of you. So if you guys, you know, want to connect after this presentation, I'm happy to connect and, you know, share experiences with each other. So where do we start this journey? The first piece that I did when I started at Kin was to meet with leadership and get an understanding or get buy-in from the organization. Without the leadership's buy-in, it's just kind of hard to implement anything across the organization. And then in addition to that, just taking an inventory of all of our current data users. So like the questions that I ask myself or ask them is like, what are the data sets that you currently use? How do you extract the data? How are you reconciling your data? And then what are your overall KPIs for the business? So this GIF down here is Ron Swanson. And if any of you watch Parks and Recreation, he is a connoisseur of various steaks. So the next step is to survey the current data infrastructure. So after you get leadership buy-in and they say, yep, go ahead, like you're owning the data, run with it. Take a survey of the data, understand what are the data sources, how are we ingesting the data? So if it's like a specific tool that you're using or, you know, a homegrown ETL infrastructure, just try to understand what is all the pieces that come together to feed into your final data source. In addition to that, just like understanding what different vendors that are used to collect and present data. So like an example for that is like, if a bunch of disparate people are managing different data vendors, you may very well be spending money on 2 vendors that are providing the same service. So that's a very important piece that I wanted to note there. And then in addition to that, understand your current issues, understand the process of collecting data, and then review any existing documentation that there may be. And in my case, there really wasn't a ton of documentation. So it was just kind of starting from scratch in that regard. So like after you take a lay of the land, more likely than not, there's going to be a massive backlog of data needs that you need to address right away. And there's you need to create a good balance of like building out new data sets versus addressing these immediate needs. So like, for example, the key needs that were to be addressed from Kin Insurance side was there was a lot of accounting, finance, and external reporting that needed to be sent out right away. So while I was focusing on building out this new data infrastructure, I also was trying to focus on, hey, like, where are the deadlines? What are the fires that we need to put out right now in order to make sure that we can move forward and not have any massive issues with like an audit or, hey, we didn't submit this report to this external agency and now they're breathing down our neck. So try to find a balance between thinking about big picture on how to build your data org, but also what are the immediate needs for the organization. And along with that, like once you start immediately building reports, people are going to really notice and say, hey, this person is someone that I respect. And that will lead to more buy-in when you're building out this data org. So next step is to get buy-in from the entire org, what I just mentioned. So we can now meet with the business and understand their needs. So I use the term followership, which is essentially just getting everybody behind you and supporting you in building out this new data org. So I tried to, like with my experience at Kin, I tried to get as many of the analysts that I could involved as possible. So like, you know, whether it be our insurance product team or our operations team, certain dev resources, just trying to communicate as much as I can with them to, you know, have them have a piece of the puzzle in building out this new data infrastructure, because more likely than not, they're going to be the end users of the data. So we need to make sure that we're meeting their needs, their immediate needs. The next step is to understand the pain points. So with, the analysts are going to have their issues. And a lot of it surrounds like, what is the speed to process this data? Like, are they running queries that take like 10 minutes long and, you know, aren't optimized in the appropriate way? Is there like a lack of data integrity? Because like more likely than not, if you don't have someone owning the data, there's going to be a ton of data quality issues, whether it be from like the queries themselves being built or wherever the data sources are flowing from. And then there could be disparate data sources. So for example, like one of the data sources that we had at Kin was a marketing tool that like tracked all of these individual events. And we had specific users on the marketing side using that specific tool and not communicating those results across the organization, which can create some issues when it comes to who do we market to, or are we over concentrated in a specific area? And then gather information about the current infrastructure. So what types of tools are we using? What's the data warehouse that we're using? What is the end business intelligence tool that we're using? And then the next step is to do your own research. So once you've gotten all of your feedback, all of the opinions from the whole organization, the next step is to just hunker down and really understand what's going on. And more likely than not, a lot of things are going to be messed up. So you need to bear that in mind and kind of have the understanding and make sure that the rest of the organization has an understanding that, hey, like this isn't going to be perfect. You know, it's a slow moving process. Like if there's continual data issues in the next couple of weeks, that needs to be expected so that we can get to an endpoint where we have vetted out all of these issues and we have solid data governance surrounding all of our different data processes. So by the end of this research, you can understand what the KPIs of the business are. And, you know, once you have those KPIs, you're going to be able to really understand what are the metrics that can grow your business or provide leading indicators to identify problems or allow you to really have a tune on the business at all times. Because if one piece of your KPIs is faltering, it could impact the business dramatically. So you need to really understand those on the offset. And then you'll also understand what data sets do the business use to make decisions. And then most importantly, who are the decision makers? Because you're going to be, at the end of this whole process, you're going to want to communicate with those people the most, because your data results are going to provide them with the tools that they need to make their decisions. So the next step is to communicate your plan to the stakeholders. So once you've done your research, you've interviewed your stakeholders, you put out all of these accounting, finance fires that you needed to right when you started, and now you want to share your plan. So make sure that you're communicating loudly what that plan is going to be, as well as ask for feedback. Like, is this the right idea? Is this the appropriate breakout of data that allows people to make decisions? So the example that I have below is just like a very dumbed down version of like how our data model is set up. So we have this core data model that provides us with our key metrics, and then those span across 3 different data marts that provide us with very specific reporting over a specific point in time in the customer lifecycle. So for the events mart, people mart, policies mart, events is to track marketing. So like you have all these events coming in from all of your users, whether they come from the web, they call into our phone line, they sent us a text, they sent us a chat. That's all being tracked and then flows into the people mart, which is where we finally get their information. We have their name, their address, we have information surrounding their house. We can start analyzing operations and how we interact with these customers that we've acquired. And then lastly, we have the policies mart, which is essentially all of the insurance related data. So once a customer signs with us and has a policy, that's to track, from that policy effective date to the date that they renew or to the date that they cancel. So it's kind of covering like the full life cycle of one of our customers. So the first area to address or one of the 3 areas is marketing and product. So the key pieces that we want to analyze are the experiment data. So we want to provide the best customer experience for our customers. How do we do that? And the first thing that comes to mind is an A/B test. So we provide different experiences for different customers and use those data results to create a customer experience that's best suited for a specific user with a specific set of characteristics. The next one is marketing spend by lead source. So we want to understand what are all of our lead sources, how much do they cost? We have multiple different sources in marketing to our customers. We have our direct mail, lead aggregators, inbound calls, chat, a number of different marketing providers. We have public relations teams that help us out, and all of those costs end up flowing into your marketing CAC, which is essentially your spend divided by your new business premium / count of customers. And you can kind of even tweak the marketing CAC even further and cohort that by, let's say, specific characteristics about the customer, or you could do it by geography. So like maybe, through data analysis, we can understand if, one area in Florida has a better conversion rate than another area in Florida, or this specific area in Florida has a lower marketing CAC than this other area, and trying to just tie together all these different metrics to make the best decision on what customers we want to go after. And then the last one being like the marketing funnel drop off. So we have specific funnel experiences to gather information so that we can provide the customer with a policy. And this process is essentially just analyzing, where did these customers fall off in the funnel and why did they fall off? Was it because we don't want to write that customer because they don't have the characteristics that we're looking for? Or is it because we don't have a good enough customer experience and we need to refine that? So then we toss in the A/B tests into that funnel and try to better understand if, there's some drop off because something's confusing or it's not very clear where they're going, or they feel like the funnel's too long. There could be a number of reasons. And then the next section is operations. So operations is kind of the next step in the cycle. So once we get that customer from our marketers, we then can start interacting with that customer. So at Kin Insurance specifically, we have a number of insurance agents that once we acquire this customer, they start interacting and engaging with the customer and trying to gather more information so that we can provide them with an insurance policy. So the key metrics that we look at from the operation side, of which there are many, is the conversion rate. So conversion essentially meaning how many leads are we turning into a customer. So one way to cohort that is to break it out by the different marketing channel. So we have inbound calls, and through looking at inbound calls, we can analyze the call time, analyze the ready time, try to figure out, what marketing source has the most efficient operations process. And, we can look at web-based, chat, and text, as I mentioned before. So in addition to that, you can also cohort it by a number of other factors. So you could cohort it by the age of the home, or what is the roof type, et cetera, just to really understand the different cohorts of customers that you have coming through the funnel. The next one to look at is assignment rate. So assignment rate takes another step back, and it's essentially saying how many leads did we engage with that we acquired. So a customer comes to our site, they type in their information, and we give them a call. If they pick up the call, the customer picks up the call, and we chat with them for a minute, we kind of consider that to be an engagement point where we can say, hey, we've chatted with this customer, therefore we feel confident that we are in that next step in order to get this person signed with a policy. Another key metric is to look at lead volume versus ops capacity. So the interesting thing about lead volume versus ops capacity is it essentially needs to be some sort of equilibrium. If you have too many leads, and obviously you're paying for all of these leads, you're going to lose a ton of money on the marketing side. If you have too much ops capacity, you're not going to have enough leads to meet the needs of the ops folks that are working on the floor, trying to acquire these customers. So marketing needs to work hand in hand with the operations team in order to understand, okay, who's working today? Can we turn on these levers to increase lead volume because we have enough capacity to meet that need of lead volume? So it's a very nuanced process of hitting specific levers to try to hit that equilibrium level. And then there's a lot of factors that go into it as well. As what if our engagement rate is lower? Then we'll have to increase our lead capacity because if the engagement rate's lower, just reps are working less leads. There's a ton of different things that kind of move that relationship, that equilibrium up and down. And then the last piece is the breakage rate. So let's say we think we acquired a customer, we bound them, and bound essentially means that they sign an application with us and we're going to provide them with a policy. How many of those customers cancel, and why are they canceling? Was it a bad customer experience? Was it something that, was it an underwriting issue of which our underwriting team reviews all of the different policies as they come in? There could be a number of reasons why a customer could cancel. And it's not always a customer service issue. It could be just by nature of reviewing the characteristics of someone's home. And then the next step is the next group that we provide data to is insurance product. So the insurance product team essentially prepares new products that we may be launching. So for example, we currently have an HO3 policy that we provide in Florida, which is a single family home. And another type of product that we could offer is like a condo policy, or a renter's policy, or a car insurance policy. So these guys are the ones that are going in and trying to work with regulators to launch new products. And in addition to that, they also look at our loss ratio to try to better understand, what customers are performing better than others. Because the name of the game is, we want to keep our operations costs low, but we also want to keep our losses low. Loss ratio is very important from an insurance perspective to keep that low. And that's where like your concentration comes into play. Like, let's say a hurricane hit in Orlando and you had 25% of your policies in Orlando. That would be a massive hit to your loss ratio. So you need to make sure that you're tracking concentration levels in different counties that you're writing policies. So they're looking at essentially everything post acquisition of a customer. So as I mentioned before, concentration and enforced policies and breaking that out by state, because the way home insurance works in the US is, different states have different requirements. So we nearly consider every new state a new product, essentially, kind of. And then in addition to that, we're looking at the coverage segmentation. So we want to see like what is the percentage of coverage B we have across our portfolio? What's the percentage of customers that have prior losses from previous policies that they've had? What are the count of customers that we've had that have had a lapse in coverage? What is the average premium? Can go on and on with all these different metrics. So what they have at Kin is just like massive dashboards that kind of track all of these things. And if there's anything that looks off, we'll raise a flag and present it to the rest of the org and say, hey, this is an issue. And those issues need to be communicated to like the marketing team, for example, because, if we're trying to acquire a customer, we want to make sure that we acquire a good customer, a good performing customer, someone that's not likely to give us a loss or submit a claim. So overarching type of structure that we want to have with the data org is a hub and spoke model. And when I say hub and spoke, is essentially like we have a data org, but we want everybody to take part in that data organization. We don't want it to be, oh, hey, Sam, can you build me this report and send it back? It should be more of a collaborative thing rather to a point where it's like someone comes to me and says, hey, Sam, I'm trying to build this report. I've done XYZ to try to build it, and I need help with this specific thing. And then my team can come in and say, oh, yeah, do this, this, and this. Instead of always being order takers, we're kind of switching it and saying, we'll give you a fishing pole and you can fish instead of us just fishing for you and giving you a fish. So the way that I have done this at Kin is a few things. The first thing being, I've created a data stewards committee, which is essentially a group of analysts from each section of our organization from different teams. So from insurance product, operations, marketing, and we meet weekly and we talk about our data challenges. We talk about the major problems that are facing each piece of the org and just really hash things out so that once we finish that meeting, every analyst in that meeting can go back to their team and say, hey, here's the biggest issues from the marketing team, or here's the biggest issues from the insurance product team. And then that creates that level of communication where the marketing team always knows what insurance product is working on from a data perspective and vice versa. So it's like building that level of communication. The other piece is sending out KPIs on a periodic basis. So at Kin right now, we send biweekly updates, and it essentially shows us our 4 KPIs, which is another good point to note, is that you don't need to have hundreds of KPIs. You just need 4 or 5, and that will pretty much give you a very clear idea of how your business is performing. So we send these 4 KPIs out on a bi-weekly basis, and we provide some context as to, why certain things are trending. And that's where you can kind of dig into different further metrics to kind of drill into specific problems. And then that can drive decision-making as like the decision makers, ingest this data, ingest the KPIs, they can then go to their respective teams or pull some levers and say, oh, we need to increase marketing spend, or, oh, we need to reduce concentration in this area, or, hey, we should invest in a new product. So all of those KPIs, all of those metrics will aid in any decision we make across the org. And then the other thing too is just like trying to educate everybody as much as you can. So what we have at Kin is we have weekly data office hours to just like have people join in, and like even in the time we're in now with being remote, everybody just logs on to a Zoom chat, and then I can talk with people one-on-one and understand or try to help them figure out, what data issues they're seeing, or if they want to build out a new dashboard or try to better understand one of our different data sources, they can do that in that session. And then lastly, just like trying to build as much documentation as you can, because a lot of the questions that will come up in these different data sessions or data office hours could very well just be documented into a Google Sheet and shared across the org and say, hey, you were interested in trying to build, a rolling 30-day average of, conversion rates or whatever it may be. You could just post that into some sort of like company-wide forum to communicate that information out. And there you have it. So you've essentially built a fully fledged analytics org that can be scaled and built upon. And that's, kind of ties into my experience, like almost identically, is just like starting from scratch and just building it out. So yeah, I am open for questions. Any questions over here?
Yeah, Sam, I'll read out a couple of these for you.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see here. So one of the first ones that was posted here was by Nate. He just asked, how do you handle stakeholders who feel maybe threatened by you and the data organization plan?
Good question. I think if someone feels threatened by you, they're probably worried that you may be exposing them in a way, and not in not in a bad way, but rather like kind of like challenging you to better explore data. And to the way that I've approached it is just try to be over communicative, and then in addition to that, ask that person what their needs are, or like ask them for suggestions on how you should develop the data org. So like I would go to this person and say, hey, like, I was thinking about like building the data infrastructure, like building this specific report like this, and just ask for their feedback. Because once you start asking them questions and getting feedback from them, they're going to feel like they have a part in it, and in turn will be on your side.
Okay, cool. And then let's see, we got another one in here from Matali. It says, what metrics can be helpful to measure success of a customer support team?
Good question. We like at Kin, we haven't really delved into that too deeply, but I would say, so if I understand correctly, from our perspective, customer service is essentially, following up with disgruntled customers, or processing claims, or reviewing policies that come in, or just anything that the customer may have a question on post-sale. So I think the big metrics there would be to look at the call time of each rep. So how much time are they spending on the phone? How much time are they ready to take calls for customers? Let's say, like, especially in this time, if we have a lot of customer service reps that aren't on their dialer. So dialer meaning we have this like phone platform where customers will call in and then we'll get assigned to a rep. And if you're in ready, that call will get routed to you. But if you're not in ready, that call won't get routed to you. So tracking the amount of time that you're logged in and ready to take a call. And then in addition to that, how much time you're spending on the phone. Some other things I would look at is tasks assigned or tasks completed. We have an internal web application that like assigns tasks to specific customer service agents for, you know, processing payment or getting refunds or processing a cancellation. And just like this, you could do like the created at of a task to the completed at and like do the average of that time to track each individual customer service rep to understand how much time it takes for them to respond to any specific task.
Cool. And then we got another one here. Let's see, from Michael. He just says that I sense that a lot of this didn't exist, or all of it didn't exist until you arrived at Kin. If this is correct, then which members of the C-suite team helped you put this together? Is it part of a formal strategic / operational plan?
Yeah, so it was a interesting. It wasn't like a very normal path for me. So I report to the CFO of the company, and the direct need, as I mentioned before, was putting out all of these fires, these data fires related to like sending out external reports and getting the accounting reporting in line. The person that helped me the most or got me up to speed was the COO, so the head of operations. And reason being is I think he's just like a very highly skilled analyst and always has been. And he was like the most in tune with the data at that point in time across the C-suite. So he took me under his wing and kind of like showed me the ropes and showed me what the immediate needs were in building out this data infrastructure. We had a data infrastructure in place, but it was very poorly managed. The queries took forever to load. There's tons of data issues. There was little like nuance, like gotchas within the data that we hadn't like fleshed out. So to answer that question, like there was data infrastructure in place, but it just like it needed a total refactor on that end. And I went through the process of like taking this like disparate data source, messy Looker instance, and then kind of transformed it into something totally new that was more manageable and scalable and able to be used by everybody across the org.
Cool. Got one. So it's kind of a double. So Nate and Stephen both kind of asked something similar here, but what kind of, I guess, tools do you use to help not only centralize, track, and manage this stuff, but also compile and visualize the data? So things like, Tableau, SQL, Excel, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the first things that I had to do when I started at Kin is to take an inventory of all of our different vendors. So we had tons of different vendors, and we kind of still do, but just like getting an understanding of all those data sources was like one of the first things that I had to do. So for kind of like starting with our database or like our web application, we have, our internal web app, or just any events that happen on the website flow through a segment tool, which is just essentially like connecting all of these different data sources and allowing them to talk to each other. That information gets then sent over to Redshift. Redshift is our data warehouse, which we store all of our data, and all of our disparate sources flow into our data warehouse in Redshift. And then we also have several other analytics tools. For example, we have Heap, which is tracking a lot of our marketing information. So like page views, and it tracks anonymous users up until they're tracked users in our database. We use Customer.io to communicate with our different customers. On the business intelligence tool, we're using Looker, which is a Google tool, as our business intelligence tool, Tableau equivalent. And then the other thing that I forgot to mention was like a lot of people were writing SQL queries and like the SQL runner and Looker. And I took an inventory of all of those different queries that people were running on their own and try to incorporate that into the actual Looker infrastructure, Looker model. So that was, can't really think of anything else. That about answered it, right?
Yeah. All right. So we got time for maybe just a couple more here. Looks like David asked too, just how do you handle dealing with poor quality data, gaps and bad identifiers, and communicating that challenge back to stakeholders, and how do you manage those expectations without, kind of looking like you're making excuses and all that?
Yeah. So dealing with poor quality of data is an issue that everybody deals with, and it's been an issue that I've dealt with for every company that I've worked at. It's you have to like give the understanding that like across the org that there are going to be data issues, but you're going to do everything in your power to minimize those data issues. So what we've done at Kin is established sets of queries that we run prior to any merge. So we have like this data quality suite, which essentially will run all of these queries to try to understand what the current state of the data is and what the future state will be once we merge that code. And if there's any changes, we'll revert the code or we just won't merge that PR. So that's like one step that you can take to kind of alleviate the data quality issues from like your own, like that's in your own purview. And then when it comes to like web application data issues, so like anything that's flowing from your web app or from a different source of data, one of the things that we've been implementing is something called a data contract. And that data contract essentially says, what are all of the data requirements that we need to define a specific event or a specific point in time? So for example, from Kin's perspective, we want to understand what an in-force policy, like what's the date of a policy effective and what events need to happen or what data pieces need to happen in order for us to say, hey, yes, this is an effective policy on this specific date. And then sending that information back to the dev team and saying, hey, in order to have a policy that's effective, we need this table filled out. We need this record to be populated. We cannot have a deleted at record in here. And we need, XYZ, something else to be populated in order to say that, hey, this is a real data point that we're presenting externally to all of our end users. So establishing some sort of communication with the dev team to say, hey, here's our requirements for this data reporting, and this is what we need from you every time you send data to us. Because what's happened in the past at Kin is someone will make a change on the web application side, like in how we track customers, and that data is flowing back to our business intelligence tools, which potentially messes up all of our reporting. And we found that it was kind of a perpetual issue, and decided that we needed to create some level of communication. And we started reviewing PRs from the dev side and saying, okay, like this, any sort of schema change we would look at and try to understand if anything had changed on our end. But that just like didn't really give us that clear understanding of what data points that we needed in order to present all of our results to our end users.
Cool. Well, we got one last one here. Let's see. It looks like we have one that just asked from Aditya. How do you push forward data science ideas to people who just don't understand the exact science? So I assume talking about maybe other members or other people in the company or other members of the team.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and to be honest, at Kin, like starting with building this like data analytics org from scratch, everything that I had received in terms of like what we need to build from leadership was, hey, we need something that works. We need something that we can rely upon at all times and that can provide us data results in a timely manner. And when I had brought up any sort of like, oh, like we should start using data science. We should start, trying to use machine learning to try to like better make decisions about customers. It always came back to, hey, let's get our bread and butter right first before we start focusing on the data science side. With that being said, we're adding those initiatives in slowly over time. But it hasn't been a major talking point. Rather, we're focused more on, let's get everything in line first before we start building out any sort of things from the data science side. My own personal opinion on how to get people to understand data science is to build something out and show that it works. So for example, if we build out, this platform that allows us to better segment customers, as long as you can show your results and reconcile those results and show the dollar impact that, implementing this data science feature would have on the organization, you're going to get buy-in. So I always, whenever I try to convince stakeholders to buy into something, it's always coming down to, how is this going to increase our conversion? How is this going to increase revenue? How is this potentially going to decrease expenses? So it's always going to come down to your bottom line.
All right, perfect. Well, hey, I appreciate it, Sam. Thanks for coming out and doing this nice remote thing we got going on here.
Yeah.
We appreciate all of that. And thanks for everyone to coming out and just in general and participating in this. And look for the upcoming events. You can check out the website, promotable.io. That'll have all the information about upcoming events that we're going to do with this live online function, and as well as all of our course schedules and things like that for our next courses. So check us out, and thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.